The defense resting its case in the trial of Kyle Rittenhouse, who shot and killed Anthony Huber and Joseph Rosenbaum and wounded Gage Gross-Krutz using an AR-15 style rifle during protests last summer following the police shooting of Jacob Blake. Remember, he came across the line too young to legally carry that weapon because he says he thought it looked cool. This time, the 18-year-old defendant didn't take the stand, so there were no tears today. But what we saw was really unbelievable. The judge asking the jury to leave the room twice for the second day in a row while he got into it with the prosecutor.
It certainly was my impression that we were talking about video of the entire episode, and not that it certainly in my mind was not limited to the specific numbers on this observation point list that you're talking about. I'm a little bit challenged when you say, is there something that I'm saying that draws the face that you're making? Go ahead, say what you want to say.
I have to say, Your Honor, yesterday I was the target of your ire for disregarding your orders. Today, the defense is disregarding your order. Yesterday, as I said, I was under the court's ire.
You know, I don't want to talk about.
Well,
why don't
I
we just?
I think it's a fundamental fairness issue, Your Honor.
All right, say what you want to say.
If I'm being held to obey the court's orders, I'm asking that the defense be held to that too. This is something we litigated at a Daubert hearing. We spent time on this.
You know, I am going to interrupt you, and then I'm going to let you talk again. But I was talking yesterday about the Constitution of the United States and how the Supreme Court has interpreted it for 50 years. That's not what we're talking about here today.
This is the second day of this. And then there was this moment, arguing over a witness's possible bias in painting a pretty rosy picture of Kyle Rittenhouse.
Does Real America's Voice have any sort of political bias or agenda or anything like that?
What is the relevance?
It goes to the bias of the witness, Your Honor.
The bias in what respect? I assume that people, as I commented at the beginning, this is not a political trial, and I don't know how you would isolate a person's particular politics and determine that that person is going to evaluate the evidence one way or another.
Has he not done any background or research on this whole thing? It's not a political trial. Okay, maybe in one sense, but if... And some of this is on the prosecutor, too. Look, I don't know what kind of pressure they're under, but maybe the prosecutor should have been stronger against the judge and tried to make his case. But if you put a witness on the stand that has said favorable things about the defendant and biased things against the people who he's accused of injuring and killing, and then who gets... The dead people can't tell their story. Let's remember that this is a judge who told prosecutors before the trial began that he wouldn't allow them to call the Rittenhouse, the people Rittenhouse shot, victims, but he would allow the defense to call them arsonists and looters.
Let the evidence show what the evidence shows, and if the evidence shows that any or more than one of these people were engaged in arson, rioting, or looting, then I'm not going to tell the defense they can't call them that. The word victim is a loaded word. And I think alleged victim is a cousin to it.
Looter's not loaded, though. Rioter's not loaded? What about alleged? What about the dead people who can't speak for themselves? During 8 days of testimony in the trial, jurors heard from 31 different witnesses. The judge told jurors that closing arguments and jury instructions in the trial are expected on Monday. Each side will have 2.5 hours total for their closing arguments. I want to discuss today with Patrick Cafferty, a criminal defense attorney who represented Jacob Blake, and his shooting by Kenosha police officer set off the unrest that led to Rittenhouse fatally shooting 2 men. Also back with me tonight is Paul Bucher. Paul Bucher knows everything about that area. He's a former district attorney for Waukesha County, Wisconsin. Good to see both of you. Thank you both for joining. Patrick, let me start with you because, we could talk about all the questions of bias swirling around. One of the defense's witnesses was, an Arizona-based commentator who works for far right-wing media outlet. He testified that he was in Kenosha to track Antifa and Black Lives Matter when the shootings happened. That is political. The judge says that he's trying to keep politics out of this case. You know this judge. What do you think of this decision or his comments?
So, Don, thanks for letting me join you tonight. As far as politics are concerned, what I'm focused on as a trial lawyer observing this is what the potential political orientation of each of the jurors is going to be. So right now you have 18 jurors. It's going to be narrowed down to 12. Kenosha County is very diverse, but it's pretty easy to identify what people's political orientation is based on which part of the county they come from. So I-94 splits Kenosha right up the middle. The west end of Kenosha County votes the same way that Utah does. The east end basically votes the same way that Chicago does. So it's blue, Democrat. And eventually you're going to have this down to 12 people. Right now you have 10 females. Statistically, females are lean toward being Democrats. You have 8 males, one of whom is of color. Statistically, men lean toward being Republican. So once they spin people out randomly, the gender breakdown here is going to be huge because of the likelihood that that will identify which political party the individual jurors are oriented toward.
So what is that?
I think that.
What is as it relates to today? Then, when he is saying this is not political, and there is a witness who clearly works for a political organization who's there to track a group that has been part of political discussions. So, what does that? Square that circle for me.
So again, from my perspective, this is about what the jurors heard. There's been a lot of focus on things that have occurred outside the presence of the jury. So the judge talking to the prosecutor and what people perceive to be a harsh tone, things of that nature. The jury didn't hear any of that. So the likelihood is that will have no effect on the jury. As far as the judge excluding the bias of the news organization that this gentleman was from, he basically let the prosecutor get to the bias in a different way by basically asking or allowing him to ask whether this person had posted things that were pro Rittenhouse. So I think that he allowed for the prosecutor to get to that issue without actually identifying which party the witness is oriented toward. I mean, generally speaking, judges don't want politics to be part of a criminal case. They want the jury to focus on the facts of the case, apply the law to the facts of the case, and come up with a decision.
But it's not like
And
the
that's what
prosecutor
this
was asking if you're a Republican or a Democrat. He was asking me if you have written things or posted things that are favorable to Kyle Rittenhouse and that are not favorable towards another group. I don't see he wasn't saying you're Republican, Democrat, and Independent. He's just asking a straight out flat question. The judge stopped him. Why? I don't understand that. Do you think that the prosecutor, there's a method to this? You said is he poking him? Is he going for something by trying to get under the judge's skin possibly?
Well, that was suggested by one individual that they were trying to throw the case, but I don't believe that to be the situation. They could easily have done that. But I just feel like he's listening. For instance, I would have come back after the noon hour yesterday and apologized to the judge, not in front of the jury, but obviously he did something that the judge didn't like. And the judge is a judge, and he's the one that runs the courtroom. So I just don't see that zeal, if you will, in the prosecutor's presentation of the case. And I just don't think they're hearing that this judge is not happy with the government. And you need to adjust. You need to bob and weave on the fly. You have to be able to do that. And I've done it, and I'm sure Patrick's done it. And when things, you can kind of see that this isn't working very well, I better try another tact.